calling darkness. Ivan Belov, the Ruzit village was burning. Orange flames greedily licked the low log cabins, howled out of tiny windows, melting the akvastekny of spring snow with unbearable heat. Black streams flowed down to the road, turning the ground into bloody mud. The roofs, covered with rotten, damp straw, were occupied reluctantly, smoldering for a long time, snorting streams of bitter smoke, and then abruptly burst into flames and settled into a blazing gut, raising clouds of ashes and sparks. The stench of burnt rags, hides, and bones was acrid. There was the sweet odor of burning flesh and the copper tang of spilled blood clinging to his lips. Sotnik Sower inhaled the odors with relish, flaring his wide nostrils in a face sharply defined, cheekbone, blackened by winds and frost. It smelled of victory, one of thousands on the way of the great Horde. Mongolian Tumans have come cold winter. All sweeping avalanche have broken out from grassy sea of Deshtai Kipchak and have betrayed wooden fortresses and cities to fire. Ruzit Khagans were killed or bowed. Their armies were scattered and defeated. This was desired by Genghis himself. Great Khan has died, but his grandson, Batu, has continued glorious business. Russia fell at his feet. Now everything here belonged to riders on low, mossy horses. There is no force that can stand against the great Horde. Hurrah, hurrah! The rich trading Novgorod remained unconquered, saved by swollen rivers and greedy mouths of bottomless quagmires. The Kurultai consulted for 2 days and 2 nights. Shamans shook the sky with the rattle of tambourines and crackling of fortune-telling bones. Slaves were slaughtered to the joy of Tengri. Spirits danced and howled furiously, and human fat melted and boiled on the sacrificial altars. The council ordered to end the campaign and announced the beginning of the Great Roundup. The Horde flowed back southward, burning villages and towns hidden far from rivers and roads. Moaning, blood and smoke of fires marked the iron footsteps of the Tumans. Sower did not seek easy prey and led the warriors into the black wilderness of boundless forests, spreading at noon from the devastated Murom. Sower was called a madman, prophesied his imminent death, but he only laughed. Sower had lost his peace ever since the warriors had fallen in with a half-mad, squinty-haired old woman. "There's treasure hidden in the thicket," screamed the half-mad Amegdii, pointing a gaunt, unbending finger. "Gold, gold!" She shook in a frenzy as she was nailed to the door. Henceforth Sower sought a way into the heart of the wilderness. The ravenous wolves followed the troop, filling the cold silence with a wistful, piercing howl. 14 of the 83 warriors of the 100 who had begun the march were left. Sower had lost 24 before Vladimir. On 410's 100 has decreased at storm of Russite capital. Bodies of batters have covered ice ramparts and up to the top have filled a moat. Mongol fury overflowed behind walls. Women, children, and men betrayed to a sword. Last defenders were lost in fire of burning house of the crucified god. The scorched city oozed blood for 3 nights. The ravens, fed up with the meat, pecked out only the eyes of the corpses. So many of them were dead. 3 more warriors had died in the last days. The sneaky Urus had covered the paths with self-shooters and trap pits. The remnants of Sower's 100 stubbornly strove forward. They broke into the village at dawn, when the faded sun had barely peeled off the horizon. 5 old men and boys armed with spears and weak bows were slaughtered. Healthy and strong men were not left. Russite men have died under banners of Hagan jury. Further there went amusement. Women were caught, flesh was pleased, bellies were cut. Warriors did not bore and old women. Babies had their heads smashed and spines broken. When the Horde comes, the spirits give a choice to submit or perish. The proud Urus chose the second. Only death awaited them from now on. The stale mare kicked her hoof and playfully raised her ass. Sower ran his palm over the velvety, glossy neck. "Delgan Karantseg, Delgan." The horse snorted and calmed down, sensitive to his master's words with its ears trimmed in the Chinese fashion. A familiar, ingratiating chime was heard, and the shaman of Hulgan rode up to the centurion on a red horse painted with colored circles. He who sees all and all sees him, wearing a coat embroidered with bone rattles, chains, and strings of bells. The shaman's right hand hung along his body. The shaman hid it, cradling it at rests and holding it close to the fire. The hand was withered, blackened, rotted to the bone, with long curls of yellow nails. Through it, many winters ago, the shaman had been possessed by the spirit of the mangy chore. Everyone feared the shaman, even Sower. He got the best cuts of meat and a share of the spoils. How could they not? Not every 100 has a shaman. The shaman predicts the weather, attracts good luck, and blesses the spirits Ogu, who give the 100 a smooth road, salvation from swords and diseases, swiftness and health to the horses. These people are beggars, Nooker? The shaman grumbled, with difficulty tearing his blue lips, behind which his red ochre-colored, ravenously pointed teeth gleamed. Their riches were wooden cups, tattered clothes, and clay statuettes of Ogloy. On the shaman's black, wrinkled palm lay a figure, half man, half beast, with crooked paws and a gnarled mouth. The toy was crudely made, and it inspired a hideous fear. "Throw it away," advised the centurion. "It will come in handy." The beast disappeared into the folds of the greasy coat. The warriors are not happy. There is no prey. Soon they will be fed up with blood. You promised gold and women, Nooker. Is gold not enough for you, Hulgana? Ho ho! The shaman's laughter was like the cawing of an old crow. The shaman poured his part of the booty into swamps and rivers, and cut the throats of slaves in glory of Tengri, drank the hot blood, and then beat in the ashes of fires, unintelligibly speaking in strange, terrible voices. Hulgana was drawn to these gloomy northern forests. He felt the power hidden in the snows and swamps. Hulgana wanted to seize that power. He had no use for gold. "I asked the Ruthenians taken alive," the shaman muttered, laughing. "Not one of them showed me the way. They're afraid of the forest, you cowardly bastards." Sower sighed heavily. It is the same everywhere. The Urus hide the way deep in the forest, to secret shrines where idols of pure gold, with eyes of large rubies and silver beards, are rumored to stand. No guide could be found by bribery, torture, or threat. Sometimes Sower himself did not know why he needed this wealth. In the wagon that followed the Tuman, he had 3 carts full of goods and 24 Ruthenian slaves. He would sell the sullen bearded men and unruly, marvelously beautiful women, leaving for his pleasure a blue-eyed, barely blossomed girl, whose sweet juice he collected first, on the corpses of his father and mother, near the ashes of burned Riazan. When Sower has had enough, he will sell her too. Persian merchants pay gold for blonde, white-skinned slave girls. I should have taken the girl with me. She kept me warm on cold evenings. A biter, though. The centurion squeezed his eyes sweetly, rubbing his bitten shoulder. The ringed armor of the Ilcherbalig jingled under his fingers. Behind the flaming huts a whip snapped whip, and rough guttural voices were heard. Daichin riders in furry hats were chasing a woman along the road. She staggered on her left foot, slipping and stumbling in the mud. Her barely covered shoulders shook under the cutting blows of the raw, twisted Tasherdak. The woman clutched a bundle of rotting cloth and skins to her chest. Oker, the squad's first archer, mounted his horse and said with a slight bow, "Huna was hiding behind the village, Nooker. It stinks like 100 dead chonin." The woman looked like a vagrant. The ragged rags thrown over her twisted body were stained with salt and dirt, and numerous gaps showed her unwashed body. The face was haggard, narrow, pale, covered with soot and grime. Her tar-black hair was tangled and falling over her eyes. Spruce twigs and dry needles clumped in the uncombed strands. She smelled of wet dog and stale leaves. Sower mocked his lips, which were cut with small scars. He had received these marks as a boy when the camp had been attacked by the Jurchens. The warrior who had killed his parents had struck the 7-year-old Sower in the face with his gauntlet. Years of slavery, humiliation, and hunger began. Freedom was returned to him by the great Genghis, the father of all Mongols, who exterminated the Jurchens and razed their ancient cities to the ground. Sower gouged out his master's eyes and dragged him across the steppe until he was a piece of dusty, slimy meat. The filthy woman stood there, not daring to lift her head. Her bare legs were covered with scars and sores, and her feet were covered with rags. "Why were you hiding?" asked the centurion. He spoke Ruthenian well, having spent 2 years on the midday borders of Rus in the guise of a merchant before the invasion. There were many others like him there, the eyes and ears of the Horde. "You are Mongols?" The woman replied simply, shifting in the dirty snow. "And you are careful." Sower smiled a smile like a sword swing, fleeting and predatory. "That is why you are still alive, my lord." The centurion was beginning to like the woman. She stood swaying and staring indifferently at the horribly mutilated bodies. He changed his mind about killing her. "Why don't you mourn for your people?" "They are not my people." The woman gave the centurion a flashing glare. She really didn't look like the golden-haired, fair-eyed Ruthenians born among the snow and vast forests. Sower bent down and hooked the beggar's chin with the end of his whip. Huge, dilated eyes, black as tar, looked up at him. There was emptiness in those eyes, like those of a man who has seen death. "You're not a Ruzitka? I am a Lianui." A haughty expression appeared on the tramp's face and immediately disappeared. It was as if a pearl had opened and then shut, protecting the jewel hidden inside. "I hate the Urus." The woman kicked a corpse lying on the roadside with its back cut open. Sower thought the dirty bundle in her arms moved. "My people lived here thousands of years before the first Urus came from the sunset. And then another and another. They were weak, we were strong. Soon enough, everything changed. The Urus chased us, persecuted us, killed us, poisoned us like wild animals, burned us with fire. Besides us, there were Cares, Mangveks, Cicherons, and Saridolans. There was room and food for all. Where are they? Gone, and there are so few of us Alianui left." "Then we have helped you," Sower grinned. "The cities of the Ruzites have been destroyed, many slaughtered, thousands wandering to the slave markets. Crows and wolves feast. Batu Khan now owns this land. The Ruzites have defeated you, we have defeated the Ruzites. Mongol Ulu's strength." "You are right, sir." The woman bowed in a bow. "But now we have nothing to eat. My children are starving." She opened the bundle. Sower sighed huskily. A naked child was crawling in the greasy skin. Ugly, gaunt, noseless, with a huge head on a brittle, skinny neck, pierced with a painful network of thin veins. The centurion was staring at him with eyes that were cloudy and upturned to his temples. They should be killed immediately after birth and burned. The mother had seen demons during her pregnancy. The child stared at the riders and sucked on a crow's foot with a wrinkled old woman's mouth. "I want that Hud," Holgana hissed. "Give me the child," Sower demanded of the woman. "No, sir, I beg you," the mother recoiled, covering the ugly man. "I have nothing but my children and this." She straightened up and held out her hand. Mesmerizingly and softly it glittered. Sower froze. On the palm of the beggar's hand shimmered and glittered a gold brooch of marvelous fine workmanship. "Give it back," the centurion demanded greedily, mesmerized by the unprecedented beauty. "Take it, sir, it's yours." The woman easily parted with the treasure. "Not with your left hand, with your right," Sower grumbled, dissatisfied with the delay. "Foolish woman. I am unfamiliar with your customs, sorry, sir." The ragged woman shifted the brooch into her right hand, awkwardly supporting the dirty bundle with the child. "The left hand brings bad luck, so beware of bringing gifts with it if you don't want to bring misfortune upon a man. Next time I will not be so kind and cut off your hand," Sower explained condescendingly. and gingerly accepted with rough black fingers a marvelous lace of openwork with a pure emerald the size of a sweet almond seed woven into the middle. One awkward movement, and the miracle seemed to crumble to dust. The brooch was ice cold. Where did it come from? Sower marveled. From the heart of the forest. The wanderer pointed to a jagged ridge of spruce peaks. The Urises call it evil, and we call it Kashinravog, the forest of 1,000 dancing demons. This is it. A slight shiver ran down the centurion's back, like a hunting dog at the sight of prey. Tingri himself had sent him this blessing. How many trinkets are there? The centurion asked with deliberate indifference. It would be easier to count the stars in the sky, the woman replied, and they will all be yours, O Lord. I will guide you, I know the way. All I ask in return is a little food for myself and my poor children. Why do you need me? Sower wondered. With this brooch alone, you can buy a herd of horses, eat plenty of steamed meat, and drink mare's milk. That's what I used to do, sir. I used to take a little, so that less wouldn't be offended, and trade it in the Uru villages for food. But you came. Now there are no Urus, no villages, no food. You can't get enough of gold, my lord. I'll give you everything, sir. You'll be richer than the kings of the Sunset Sea. A morning that started out dull and gray turned out to be a success. Do you need a child so badly? Sower turned to the shaman. This hut is marked by the spirits. Halgana clenched his filed teeth ravenously. Halgana will divine the entrails and see the future hidden by the dark veil of Hontanage. Emegte knows the way to the forest. Halgana. Will she guide us? The shaman froze in his saddle. Not likely if you let her bastard guts out. Uzgoin Tulgoy, Ulu Kem, Biu Shoda. The shaman cursed. Halgana can wait. Let the Shulma which show us the way. You'll get the Haida when we get there. Sower promised and looked at the woman. What is your name? Viria, my lord. You will lead me to the gold and get me as much food as you want. I will do anything, my lord, but swear on your life, soul, and the great god Tingri that you will not harm me or my children. Clever. Bitch, Sower remarked. Tingri's oath is inviolable, unless you want to bring 100 misfortunes upon yourself and turn into a midnight spirit, an Oga forced to wander forever among the dead and witches. I swear by Tingri, life and soul, I will not touch you or your children, Sower said. Halgana will do it for him. The word is out, O Lord. Varia shook her black hair. I will take you to Kashinrawag. You will feed me and my hungry children. Hurry, sir, we must go now. Oker, Sower called out. Gather the warriors. Oker nodded and sped off, mounting his horse. There were shouts of encouragement. The Mongols abandoned digging through the beggars' belongings, killed the captives, and jumped into the saddles. The village was burning in a cloud of soot and soot. Coals clinked, and bitter smoke drifted to the ground in the damp, brainy air, swirling around trees with scorched branches and horses' hoofs. Horses stepped gingerly over bodies. How many villages like this were on Sower's path? He wasn't counting. Viria lurched forward, clutching the child to her chest. A filthy rag tied over her shoulder became the semblance of a cradle. Sower let Hurinseg step with a single movement of his knees. His heart beat measuredly, rumbling. The eroded spring mud, covered with thin, fragile ice, was chomping. Varia turned off the road onto the boundary of a dormant snowfield. Stitches of fox tracks stretched across the snow-white virgin soil. Sower smiled. There are so few open spaces in these lands. The Urusians gnaw away scraps from the forest, grub stumps, sow grain and harvest their meager crops, living on starvation. Digging in the ground is the lot of weaklings and slaves. Destiny of the real man, war and hunting. Therefore Russians are weak and helpless. Soon any memory of them will be dispersed, and only Mongol Ulus is eternal and indestructible. Now not soon this land will be cut by a harrow or a plow. The grass will stand up to the waist. There is no picture more pleasing to the heart of a nomad. The rough ridge of the forest was slowly approaching. Sower had been to its edge 100 times and retreated 100 times. The forest had always deceived. A laughter could be heard in the whistling of the wind. The forest invited, the forest lured and called to nowhere. It promised to open up, but after 100 steps it led to a wall of 100-year-old trunks locked side by side, squelched with mires, threatened to drown in the snow. Today Sower wanted to win. He did not trust this dirty, ragged woman. He did not trust anyone but himself. He knew his warriors too well. Genghis laws and iron discipline made them the best warriors in the world. But at the sight of blood and gold, they turned into wild beasts. Sower glanced behind him. Hulgana, who was swaying gently, rode on the trail. The shaman's eyes were half closed, and the bells woven into his black, lard-smeared braid tinkled melodiously, chasing away evil spirits. The shaman's calmness was deceptive. He was eager to touch the secrets and power hidden in the impenetrable, dead thicket. Young ringing voices were heard. The cheerful brothers Gunshur and Zargal began to sing a song about ancient heroes and feats. Zargal played along on a sweet-sounding yatag with 21 strings. At the edge of the field melted a huge stone with a carved picture of a hunt. Skinny, long-legged men were stalking a humpbacked beast with huge, upward-bent horns. The trail ended, and the frozen ice crackled under their hooves, breaking off in pieces and glistening in the warming sunlight. The line of riders descended into a shallow ravine. The muddy meltwater, stagnant at the bottom, bristled with brittle, dry reeds. Sower blinked and found that the forest was now behind him. He stared unkindly at Varia. What is this Shulma up to? Circling, playing. In 100 steps the forest was on his right hand. The small rowan trees were replaced by a grove of birch trees, half-ringed towards the burnt village. There were still trickles of black smoke oozing into the sky. It smelled of damp wood and the fresh odor of settled snow. The thicket crept up like a wolf. The birch trees slipped away, and huge fir trees, a couple of girths in height, leaned their heavy mossy paws to the ground. At the edge of the forest Sower saw a place of worship. Densely stood the dug-in crosses of a crucified god, blackened and of fresh wood. The old man's loosened teeth were sticking out of the woods, and the old guardian idols with their blind faces were facing the forest. The branches of the fir trees were thickly laced with colorful ribbons. Scraps of cloth twisted and flapped in the wind. The Mongols stopped, the song subsided. Kulgana slid off his horse and shuffled along, falling knee-deep in the snow. He walked, touching idols and crosses. He stopped at the trees, touched the branches, whispered a prayer, tore a silver bell from his coat and tied it among the ribbons. What's that for? Varia was surprised. One should honor foreign gods. Sower looked down at her. The Yasa Genghis Khan's law says so. Otherwise foreign gods can get angry and take revenge. The Urises burned foreign gods on fires and built churches on the shrines. Varia grumbled. You are better than the Uris. We are Mongols. Sower proudly prostrated himself. The people chosen by the great Tingri. You promised to show me the way, Shulma. Can't you see it? Wondered Varia. Are you laughing, woman? Sower dropped his palm to the hilt of his saber. The shaman returned, tumbling over on crooked short legs, and climbed on his horse. Let you and your glorious warriors close your eyes, the witch murmured. Trust me, Lord. And let no one peek, especially not the cunning sorcerer, who seems to be asleep, but I can feel the lustful, fiery stare in my ass. Sower obeyed, though he didn't like it. The forest was wary and quiet, no fresh tracks in sight. If the trashy woman had led the sons of the steppe into an ambush, she would regret it. The centurion gave the order and closed his eyes. The warriors obeyed without question, even the shaman. I will count the fingers on my hands and open my eyes, Shulma. There is more than enough time, Lord. Sower squirmed in his saddle. He was tempted to open one eye. He restrained himself. Virya murmured nearby in a strange language that sounded like the cry of an eagle. "It is done, my lord." Sower opened his eyes. The warriors murmured in amazement. A road opened before them. The forest was as if chopped by a sword blow, and the gap was lost in the gloomy thicket. For riders in a row could pass along this road. "I have caught the wandering road for you, my lord." Virya smiled, wrapping a cloth around her hand. The snow near her feet was colored red. Blood and the ancient word. "Come, the gate will close soon." The woman boldly stepped over the invisible boundary, the air trembling and pulsing. Sower touched the mare. The forest embraced him. The peaks closed overhead, keeping out the sunlight. The snow on the road had melted, but under the trees it lay stiff, dotted with spruce needles, pitted at the roots. They had not gone 100 paces when Halgana rolled off his horse, fell to his knees, and began shoveling snow, moss, and rotten grass, exposing the cracked gray masonry. I told you. Halgana jumped up and danced. Halgana feels the power. Oh, Halgana will become Tengri's greatest servant. He shook his fist at the void and laughed joyfully again. This is how a child rejoices when his father puts him in the saddle for the first time. Sower looked around. The forest, with its idols and crosses, had disappeared. The trees were closed in a motionless formation. Oh, the shaman's eyes glittered with bright fire. Tell the witch to go faster. Nooker. Why would there be a paved road in the forest, Shalma? Sower marveled. Virya walked at the stirrup, her voice enchanting and quiet. There was not always a forest here, Lord. Many millennia ago, mighty sorcerers ruled these lands. They built cities and paved paths along which mighty armies traveled. They were as powerful as the gods. The gods were angry, and at midnight ice fell. It was taller than the tallest trees and touched the sky. All living things fled, except the sorcerers. They accepted the challenge. Too arrogant, too proud, they tried to stop the ice. Fools. The sorcerers died, and the white wall wiped out their cities. Then the ice crept away and melted. The water rose and swallowed a huge island in the ocean, far into the sunset. The sorcerer's kingdom was gone. All that was left were the foundations of the fortresses and temples in the forest, dead stones licked away by ice and water, holes in the slopes of ravines leading to forbidden depths and dungeons where ancient books in obscure languages and treasures lay. Sower relayed the conversation to the shaman. Halgana was not interested in the treasures. Halgana shook at the mention of books. He's crazy. Why would a man who couldn't read need books? The forest on his right hand began to thin. Barkless trees strode toward the clouds with dead, ossified peaks. Water glimmered in the gaps. It smelled of mud and rot. The stinking mire gnawed at the road in toothless fury. Among the dead aspen trees, an old settlement was sprawled out. The village used to stand on an island, but now the swamp had devoured it. The remains of a log road were visible. The earth ramparts had fallen away. The miserable dugouts had collapsed. On the stakes of the rotten, moldy fence there were greenish skulls, animal and human. Some of the human skulls were fresh white, and one, with a grin, was reddened, as if the flesh had only just been peeled off. Sower had heard of wild forest tribes whose warriors took the faces of their enemies as trophies. The forest has grown in the place of the sorcerer's kingdom, Virya continued. The Uruses avoid it, the forest kills strangers. Why doesn't the forest kill you? Sower's insides grew cold. Those born in the forest belong to the forest. Every third child I give to Kashin Wag. When I die, my body will nourish the roots of the trees. This forest stands on bones. Strip the moss, scatter the leaves. There will be bones and skulls everywhere. As long as you are with me, the forest will not touch you. The sun faded and shrank, drowning in a murky pink haze. The swamp had receded. Piles of rotten deadwood rose along the roadsides. Chutkert nests made of twigs were found in the crowns. Tangles of lichen hanging from the branches swayed as if alive. There was no wind. Sower felt fear creep up his spine with bony fingers. Once in a while there was a sigh in the wilds. Heavy, tearing, and frightening. But the road straight, black, and icy was the most frightening of all. The road was not overgrown. The forest was afraid to step on it. The dead trees did not fall on the path, although the rotting corpses of forest giants were piled up on the sides, breathing with torn roots and spreading the ribs of sharp, dried-up limbs. There was a deceptive, unkind silence in the thicket. No birds sang, no animals crossed the path. The forest lurked. Sower could feel with the back of his neck the wicked, unblinking gaze following him from the thicket. Nooker. Sower shuddered when he saw Turgeon, the tensor. During the storming of Bokhara, Turgeon had been hit by a stream of boiling water. His right eye had boiled out. The boiling water had burned the flesh of his cheek to the bone, bared his teeth in an eternal grin, seeped under his armor, and streaked his back with swollen purple streaks. Sower remembered the screams of the 10th man, rolling under the wall among the burning, oil-drenched battering rams and mangled bodies. Turgeon howled and tore off his clothes and kataga. Mongolian thousands climbed on top. On that bloody day, Sower was the first to climb the wall and lift the Khan's bunkuk. Bokhara fell. At night, orange from fires, under the whistle of human bone blowers and the cries of dying inhabitants, Sower received the rank of centurion, a black stallion and a golden pays. And at dawn, a dead-looking Turgeon crawled into the victor's camp. I'm listening. The warriors are grumbling, Nooker. The forest is frightening the sons of the steppe. The dozen-man hissed, his face disfigured and his words poorly enunciated. You shouldn't have trusted the witch. She must be killed. The warriors of the steppes fear nothing, said Sower. You know me, Turgeon. Have I ever given you reason to doubt me? No, Nooker. But the warriors say the witch has deceived you. The tent maker spat in the woman's direction. Calm the warriors, the Shulma is under my protection. The witch is leading us to untold treasures, which we will divide equally. Go, old friend. He put his hand to his chest and rode away, whipping his horse. A wicked man, Varia said. He wants me dead. I can see it. If you cheat, I'll kill you myself. Fair enough, the Shulma nodded. The child fluttered on her breast, a huge chick squawking. The mother began to lull him to sleep, speaking in a strange foreign tongue. Eniwa imwalam lovo, Eniwa imwalam lovo, I sundahar. There was a sea of tenderness and love in her voice. The child was yelling. Here, let him shut up. Sower took a piece of dried meat out of his saddlebag and tossed it to Vera. She caught it on the fly like a dog, and the meat disappeared into the folds of the greasy skins. The shrieking stopped, and there was a vile rustling. Sower received a grateful look. The road flowed measuredly beneath his hooves. The trees intertwined in a great branching arch, closing the sky and casting long, rippling shadows. This road has no end, Sower thought suddenly. There is only the beginning. This is the road of the spirits. He saw a circle of black stones 3 cubits wide and knee-high on the roadside. The stones bore the marks of workmanship and were fitted so tightly that there were no gaps. Dark, seemingly black water spilled inside. No animal paths led here, and the trees and shrubs all around were warped and graying. The spruce trees had nodded painfully and lost their needles. The warriors bellowed with joy as they turned their horses around. Do not drink this water, O Lord, Varia warned. There used to be a witch's bath here before the glacier. Evil water. Halt, Sower shouted. Shulma said not to drink this water. Your witch lies, Nooker, objected a short, crooked-footed merkit named Bayer, who was always getting into trouble. He would burn his coat by the fire or lose his saber and get whipped. During the robbery of one village, Bayer was attacked by a vicious Ruthenian dog. The soldiers were laughing when Bygone came out of the barn on all fours, howling and roaring, with his pants torn and the dog clawing at his ass. He dragged the dog's head around for a long time, hanging it from his saddle until it began to stink. From then on he was nicknamed the Thunder Dog. "Our furs are empty," Bygone shouted stubbornly. "Water. We've been traveling since dawn. The witch will make us thirsty." The others supported the thundering dogs. "Death is hidden in this water," answered Sower calmly. "I can't smell anything," Halgana said suddenly, sniffing the air with his nose. "Shalma cannot be trusted. Whoever wants it, let him drink it." Sower looked suspiciously at the shaman. What kind of game is he playing? The centurion turned his mare around and sniped into the void. "Good. You may drink." The warriors did not move from their seats, afraid to break the Nooker's will. Their burning eyes were fixed on the spring. Even the restless Bygone became quiet. "Why are you frozen? Let's go," ordered Turgeon, grinning with a bare jaw and an empty hollow where his eye socket had been. "I am not afraid of the words of the Shalma." Gunjer, young and slender, jumped easily from his saddle and stepped toward the stone circle. "Stop him, my lord." Varia darted in front of him. "Get out of the way, witch." Gunjer threw the woman away, and she fell. "I'm with you," Zargal supported his elder brother. "I beg you," Varia shouted and thrashed in the mud. Who listened to her? Gunjer scooped water into his palm, sniffed it, shivered with disgust, and laughed happily when he saw how frightened the warriors were. He drank, washed his face, and proclaimed, "Ooh, it's icy. It is the tastiest water I have never tasted on this side of Ichor." The brothers drank, splashed, laughed, and drank the horses. The horses pulled the water through their teeth, snorted and flicked their ears. There was no one else. Even Bygone had calmed down. The warriors kept an anxious, restrained silence. "Why don't you get drunk yourself, Halgana?" Sower asked angrily. "Oh, Halgana has enough water." The shaman, who had been watching his brothers, slammed down the gourd flask that gurgled merrily. "Halgana is too old to go down." The cavalcade continued on its way. "Madmen, they don't know what they're doing," Varia whispered, her legs weaving. "Bad, evil water. Madmen." Gunjer and Zargal laughed. The yatag rattled melodiously. The brothers were intoxicated by their own courage. "Heroes, Hazam Akhan," Sower muttered to himself. The blighted sun was slowly going down into the sunset. The horses were restless and snorting. From far away came a muffled, heavy howl. The warriors looked around, clanking their blades, expecting an attack from any direction. "Can we make it before dark?" Sower frowned. "If we don't drink in every puddle," Varia grinned, quickening her step. Either the strange cries or the fiery, heavy air made her dizzy. "Sower, Sower." A quiet, vaguely familiar voice pounded in her temples. "Sower, Urgine." The centurion was beginning to feel nauseous. To distract himself a little, he asked, "Do you have a husband, you dirty girl?" "I've had many husbands." Varia blew a stubborn strand from her face and winked seductively. Well, that's what she thought. "You could be the last of them." The centurion gurgled, mimicking laughter. "Sower, Sower, Urgine." He groaned in the back of his head. "I'd sooner lie down with a sheep. She's prettier and smells better." "Maybe there won't even be a sheep around," Varia countered. "Then we'll see." "Don't listen to him, he's a liar." "Who?" Sower opened his mouth stupidly. "The voice in your head. It's the call of the forest. Don't listen." The conversation was interrupted by a startled shout behind him. "Bygone! Where are you going, Bygone?" "Stop!" Sower turned around. The voice in his head subsided. The warriors huddled together and shouted excitedly. A horse without a saddle stood orphaned and pathetic. A spear, a round shield, and a helmet decorated with horsehair lay beside it. Bayur, the hound of the dogs, slid off the road and strode into the darkening forest with a jerky, awkward gait. Bayur, called out the centurion. The warrior did not turn around. As he descended into the ravine, he grasped the brittle, dead arms of the shrubbery, plunging waist-deep into the damp, melted snow. Bayur! The thunder of the dogs froze and turned slowly. His eyes were mad and black, pupils enormously dilated. "Mother!" he breathed out. "Mother Surgelin is calling me. 8 winters I have not seen her." A restrained whisper ran among the Mongols. "The spirits are beckoning Bayur. Bayur is missing. Have mercy, great Tingri." The storm of the dogs jerked, shifting his stiffened legs with difficulty. A soundless, insistent call was pulling him into the mire. "Stop him, my lord," Varia pleaded. "The forest will swallow the wretched man, digest him and spit out his yellow bones." "You cannot interfere with the spirits, woman," Sower said in surprise. "The spirits always take the one they have chosen. If you interfere with them, there will be trouble." "Is this not your warrior, my lord? Have you not all fought side by side? Spirits, woman, they always get their way." "I'm coming, Mother Surgelin," Beer wheezed, picking his way through the thicket. "Wait, mother." A quick shadow darted across. Sower saw Varia. The black woman ran off the road, caught up with the storm of dogs and, grabbing her shoulders, piled her whole body on top of her. The Mongols murmured, and angry cries were heard. Halgana was silent and frowned unkindly. Bayur struggled, wailed unintelligibly, trying to free himself. Varia would not let go. She pulled the warrior's head to her with unexpected strength and whispered hotly in his ear. Bayur burrowed into the ground, silent. A moment later, the warrior, who had been through dozens of battles, sobbed, his shoulders shaking. Shulma took Thundering Dogs by the hand and led him back like a newborn foal. Docile, perplexed, wonderfully calm, the riders were hurrying to get out of the way. A madman who dares to snatch a sacrifice from the spirits is cursed, not to be touched, not to be spoken to. Sower saw it once. A father rescued a drowning child. Both were stoned to death on the shore. Varia came up and said, "I'm sorry, Lord. The forest wanted to take that man. I wouldn't let them. Your spirits had nothing to do with it. They are powerless in the north. The old gods still rule here." Bayur smiled like a fool and twisted his head around. "You have angered the Chans," Sower insisted. "When I speak to you, I put my neck to the sword of Monihor. Then kill me." Varia tore her robe from her chest, exposing her blue-blonde flesh. "Cut me down, my lord. Find the treasure yourself. You're mad, witch. You want the lash? Take it." Bayur drooled and clung to Varia like a big, loyal dog, except that he chalked the road with his tail. Sower swung the Tasherdak whip and lowered his hand. "Cunning damned woman." She grabbed him by the throat before he knew it, and her grip was the envy of another wolf. "You'll be sorry, Shulma. Now take me where you promised." "What about the wrath of the spirits, my lord? You'd better drive me away." To the checker of the spirits, Sower rose from his stirrups and proclaimed, "This woman has broken the law, but she is under my protection. Do you hear?" The warriors did not answer, maintaining a sullen, angry silence. Halgana opened his blue mouth, but had no time to say anything. The formation, which had scattered in an uneven half-ring, suddenly broke apart. The horse under Gunjar arched its neck back, snorted, and fell. The rider had time to dismount, rolling over his shoulder. The animal's front legs bucked, its hind legs digging through moss and rotten grass. "Ha, you damned nag! Get up!" shouted the angry Gunjar. "Aharishera!" The horse jerked with a terrible crunch of bones and fell silent. Black-green stinking slurry flowed from its mouth, nostrils, eyes and ears. The veins beneath the velvety skin swelled and burst. "Hot male!" Gunjar kicked the dead carcass. He rode faster than a bird, and now he's dead. What happened to your face, Gunjar? The centurion asked, seeing a scattering of small, pus-filled sores around the warrior's lips in his sparse beard. Where? The warrior ran his hand over his cheeks, and the skin under his fingers burst and crawled in a flap. I warned you, Varia hissed angrily. Bad water. Tell him to take off his mittens, master. Aren't you hot in mittens, Gunjar? Sower asked. Take them off. Why? Gunjar grinned. I ordered it. Gunjar slowly pulled off the gauntlet. The warriors gasped. The hand was as if scalded in boiling fat. The red, swollen skin was peeling off in rags. It doesn't hurt at all, Gunjar muttered, smiling wryly, and fell down. Brother! Zargal whirled from his saddle, snatched up his axe, and shrieked. The witch has inflicted Harel. Blisters and festering sores dotted his chin. His left eye was blurred and covered with black cobwebs. Kill, sir. Kill. Varia screamed, hiding behind the centurion. Sower took the blow. Steel met steel. He swung and Zargal staggered and fell. When he rose, it was no longer Zargal. His face was distorted and frozen in a horrifying mask, the flesh on his cheek bursting, the wound squelching with pus, his teeth snapping menacingly. The horse beneath Sower snorted and danced, throwing out a thin leg. A hoof struck Zargal in the shoulder. His armor clinked, and Zargal's arm dangled, but he didn't notice, shifting his weighted legs and clacking his jaw. Sus Sorik, Sower realized. The living dead. Save us, Tengri. The bowstring slammed. An arrow plunged into the magpie's back. Ochre was already tearing another from his quiver. Frightened horses snorted. Warriors shouted. The motionless Gunjar came to life, clawing at the stones of the road and grumbling. Cut off the head, my lord, screamed Varia. Don't let the dead man hurt himself. Sower waited a moment and then struck. The blade flicked Zargal's head, clinking against the iron of his shoulder plate. The body took a couple of unsteady, drunken steps and collapsed on its back. Gunjar got up on all fours and spat out blood. The nearest warrior pinned the dead man with a spear. The tip entered between the shoulder blades. Sorich fumbled, twitching and groaning. In the next instant, the saber blew his head off. Sower exhaled. The idea of going into the heart of the forest no longer appealed to him. Where black magic reigned, there was no place for humans. There was a juicy smack and a wave of unbearable stench. Zargal's horse stood motionless, staring longingly into the void. His belly burst, and his entrails, which had turned into a slimy pulp, fell under his hoofs. The stench made his eyes water. The stallion stepped with his hoof into his own intestines and slanted his gray, unblinking eyes in bewilderment. Sheb Manu Ta, Turgeon swore, and brought his mace down on the dead horse's head. The ribbed iron ball fractured the skull. The stallion staggered and fell silently. We must go, sir, we must go, Varia wailed. The night is near, and in the darkness the horsey and slimy slippery carns will crawl to the smell of death. Let's go, Sower shouted angrily, turning his mare around. There was no desire to find out what kind of horsey and carns they were. He wanted to get as far away from here as possible. He waited for the shaman and said, Are you satisfied, Hulgana? They died because of you. It wasn't Hulgana's fault. The shaman chuckled nastily. The spirits told them to drink. It was necessary, Nooker. How else would I check? Hulgana knows now that the old sorcery still lives in this forest. I will seize that power and make it serve. My warriors died without seeing the enemy. What will I tell their mothers? What did you tell Anur's mother? Do you remember him? You shared a prisoner in Moraga. Poor Anur wanted to know his first woman. You bashed his head in. What do you care about their mothers? Less warriors, more gold, is it not? Sower turned away, lost in troubled thoughts. This woman, Why does she care for the squad as if she were one of us? She warned about the water, saved Beer's fool, was genuinely worried that the magpie would not snatch the living. What's on her mind? My head was splitting, my temples were aching. The sickly, gaunt sun, shrouded in tattered clouds, broke behind a jagged ridge of shabby yellowed spruces. A shaky, pale twilight descended on the forest, changing the shape of objects and playing with imagination. There was a lingering groan and groaning in the thicket. Dry deadwood crackled. Cold flowed from the depths of the black, bottomless ravines. Breath turned to vapor. The forest thinned and blurred. In the gaps a pale, foggy morass swirled. Visibility dropped to a couple of dozen paces. A large clearing emerged out of the thickening darkness. "Here we are, Lord." Varia's voice flashed with satisfaction. The snow in the clearing had melted, nesting only in some places in sloppy, muddy bumps. Crooked trees peeked through the mist. The horse gave a warning snort and jerked. Its hind legs scrambled over the edge of a bottomless hole. "Be careful," Viria warned. "These holes lead to ancient quarries and mines, and most of them weren't created by humans." Sower looked around, seeing half a dozen more similar wells in crowns of crumbling, slimy stones. The ground beneath Huranzig's hooves was lined with decayed bones. In the dry wormwood and braids of fireworms lay sagging ribcages, broken spines, and yellowed skulls staring with empty eye sockets. Shards of blades, shattered shields, and scraps of armor were scattered in a carpet. The vanquished were left unburied, and the victors were so rich that they had not collected the spoils. Or there were no victors. Sower breathed excitedly and frequently at the sight of gilded armor, finely carved helmets, and jeweled sword hilts. Ruthenian, Frankish, and Cuman armor lay intermingled. What battle had been fought here? When? What difference does it make? The main thing is that the damned woman didn't lie. Here it was the treasure, all you had to do was reach out and grab it. Sower rolled from his saddle, old bones cracking under his heel. A skull with the remnants of fiery red hair rolled out of his horned helmet. A gold fibula, a deer frozen in a leap, gleamed in the rags. The centurion grasped the bling with cold, unbending fingers. The red-haired skull watched him and grinned mockingly. "Nothing, grin. Dead men don't need treasure." Farther away, gold glittered, gems shimmering hotly in the twilight. Warriors climbed off their horses, crawling on their knees, picking up the treasure by the handfuls, stirring and scattering the dead bones. Sower lost his head, sprinted across the clearing, and shouted happily, "Oh Shulma, my gratitude will be immense. You and your children will have plenty of food from now on." "You're right, Centurion." Varia's voice changed. The subservient notes disappeared from it. "The deal is done. Gold for you, food for my children." Ayun Targalef. Sower was stunned. The woman leapt toward the shaman, steel glinting eerily in the semi-darkness. Halgana twitched and screamed. Blood from his torn belly splashed Varia's face. "Come, my children. It is time to feast." Varia straightened up, the wretched robe falling from her shoulders, exposing her large, heavy breasts. Bayer crawled at her feet and whimpered. Halgana crumpled to the ground and howled in a rapidly swelling puddle. A baby rolled out of the bundle the witch had dropped. Its mother had not seen demons. She had copulated with them, and she was a demon herself. Above the waist, the child still looked human, albeit ugly. But below the waist there was a fringe of thin black suction cups, glistening scales, stinking slime, and a second pair of underdeveloped hands. The bogeyman crawled up to the still living shaman and began to greedily lap up fresh, steaming blood. Dozens of cold, lifeless eyes lit up simultaneously in the dark forest. There was a rustling, a clanking sound. The sound came from the well. The stale air was cut by a long, heartbreaking howl of anger, hunger, and longing. It smelled dead and rotten. A skinny clawed paw clung to the edge. Someone screamed, like ochre, but Sower was already running away. The screams of terror behind him were replaced by snarls, the shrieking of horses, howls, groans, the crackle of torn flesh, broken bones and crushing iron. Sower didn't care. He burst into the forest, nearly fell, snagged on a root, and broke into a thorny bush. He scratched his face, the branches grabbing at his chain mail, his gauntlets and helmet missing somewhere. The evening half-darkness embraced the centurion. The trees jumped and spun a devilish round dance. Scraps of thoughts arose in his head. That's where the treasure came from. That's why the witch was guarding the squad. Lying creature, the way a shepherd protects his flock as he leads them to the slaughter. Sower fled. The screams subsided, and an ominous, triumphant moon rose. Flexible, stinking shadows slid around him. He was panting, a stabbing in his side. The night light chased the centurion. The trees creaked and whined. Flakes of ash fell in velvet snow. Sower, a dead voice called affectionately from the darkness. Why are you running? The centurion crashed headlong into a huge, wrinkled oak and turned, his back pressed against the trunk. Varia followed him, tall, naked, marvelously beautiful. Her eyes were blazing, blood dripped from her scarlet lips onto her upturned nipples. The centurion stiffened. He plundered cities and, by order of the Khans, slaughtered peoples by the root, measuring children by cartwheel. He saw mountains of corpses and burning cities. He had never been afraid, until this day. The fury of the steppe was powerless when faced with the terror lurking in these forests. The Mongols themselves had unleashed this nightmare, driven by the rebellious Urus deep into the silent, cursed thickets. Will you be my husband, brave Sower? The witch approached, swaying her wide hips, alluring, desirable, repulsive, and deadly. Her face changed subtly, from a hideous countenance to a beautiful countenance. Sower tore his saber from its sheath. The creature scowled. The next instant, the centurion slashed the smoky blade across its throat, spat blood, and collapsed face first into the melted snow. He did not want to be anyone's husband. Noyan Mundhalai's troops spent a week trotting along the muddy roads, stumbling over ashes, swollen corpses, and flocks of shrieking crows. Luck had deserted Mundhalaya, a kinsman of Batu Khan himself, the root of Genghis. May the mercy of Tengri be with him forever. Villages and hamlets in the area were ravaged. Trees on the fires were bent under the weight of strung-up bodies. The Horde was departing, driven by the early spring, leaving behind them desolation, ash and decay. Nothing remained but cooled coals, rags, and handfuls of grain trampled into the dirt. The young Noyan delayed on the snowy passes of Kaukazqursha, missing the best time, when Ruttian cities were disappearing in flames, and the worst of the warriors were shoving carved bowls and gold frames from blackened mothballed boards of Ruttian gods into Toroks. Now Mundhalai was intolerably ashamed to return without prey and captives, to the ridicule of toothless old women. The wicked tongues, ignorant of mercy, would attach a hurtful nickname, Woe Warrior, Empty Hands, or worse. Noyan, who is always behind. Who would go on a campaign with such a Khan? The father, old, half-blind, who lost an arm and an eye in the battles, will turn away, tell him to put on a dress and send his youngest son to live in the female half of the yurt, to watch over the cattle and the hearth. The only thing left to do is to run away or throw his womb on the sword. An unenviable fate for a young batter, dreaming of battle and exploits. Young Mundhalai was saved from disgrace by chance. Tengri himself had mercy on him. Yesterday, a ragged Mongolian warrior came to the camp and promised treasure to the Noyan. The warrior could not pronounce his words well, and his throat was decorated with a purple, terribly swollen scar. Today, he led Mundhalai's band into the forest. In return, he asked for a trifle food for his hungry children and his pregnant wife.